Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into this really surprising, super ancient idea that honestly might be the key to making modern relationships actually work in this crazy, nonstop world we live in. Let's get into it. All right, let me ask you a question. Does it ever feel like the grind is just winning? You know, like our careers, our side hustles, our endless to-do lists, they're all in this constant tug of war with our relationships for our time and, let's be real, our energy. I mean, it's a tension that so many of us feel every single day. And you know what? That makes sense because relationships, especially marriage, they're not static things. They're alive. They're always changing, moving through these different seasons. Some seasons are amazing, light and joyful. And others, well, they can really test what you're made of. And because of that natural rhythm, we absolutely have to be intentional about how we navigate the whole thing. I mean, just think for a second about what we're up against here. You've got your career, maybe a side hustle. You've got social causes you're passionate about. And then boom, a constant flood of notifications and digital distractions. Our whole culture just screams hustle, hustle, hustle. But you gotta ask, what's the price of all that hustle on the people we're closest to? Okay, so this is where it gets super interesting. We're about to dive into this ancient, and I mean radical, command. It's this wild proposal from thousands of years ago that, you won't believe it, feels like it was written specifically for us right now. So here it is. It comes from the book of Deuteronomy. It says a newly married man, he gets a pass. He's exempt from going to war, exempt from any other public duty for a full year. And why? What's the reason? To stay home and, get this, bring joy to the wife he has married. Just let that sink in. No national service, no big civic projects for an entire year. Now, this wasn't about some year-long honeymoon vacation, okay? The whole point, the core principle, was about building what we can call an intentional foundation. This law was basically a huge flashing sign saying, hey, your marriage matters. It's a priority for the whole community. It's all about carving out dedicated time to build a super strong base, to figure out how to be a team, and to actively, on purpose, create joy together. But to really get how mind-blowing this was, you have to understand the world it came from. This wasn't just some minor update to the rules. No, this completely flipped the script on what everyone expected. So, picture ancient Israel. Like a lot of cultures back then, it was a deeply patriarchal society. And in that world, the wife was usually seen as the one responsible for, well, everything. For her husband's honor, for his happiness. Basically, the emotional heavy lifting, that was all on her. And then this law comes along. Talk about a radical shift. So the normal expectation was, wife is responsible for husband's happiness. Got it. But this law just turns that completely upside down. All of a sudden, the husband is legally, publicly required to make his wife's joy a priority. It just totally reverses the flow of who's responsible for the emotional well-being of the relationship. Now, look, this didn't just snap its fingers and erase patriarchy overnight. Of course not. But what it did was plant this incredibly powerful seed of balance. For a law back then to focus on a wife's emotional well-being and not just suggest it, but back it up with the full authority of the community and God, that was nothing short of revolutionary. It was a huge statement about the dignity and the value of women within the marriage. But this idea, this seed, it didn't just stop there in the Old Testament. It actually grew and evolved, deepening into an even richer, fuller vision of what mutual love could be. Fast forward to the New Testament, and you see the Apostle Paul take this same principle of prioritizing your partner and just cranks it up to 11. He tells husbands to love their wives with this radical, self-giving, sacrificial kind of love. So the focus shifts from just bringing joy for 1 year to a whole life of service and love. And this idea of mutuality, it gets even clearer. In another spot, Paul says that husbands and wives have equal rights and responsibilities to each other. The key word there is likewise. In a world where guys held pretty much all the power, to say that things should be equal and mutual, again, completely revolutionary. So what we're seeing here is this really beautiful progression, right? That little seed from the Old Testament, the idea of caring for your wife's well-being, it just blooms into this incredible vision of marriage built on shared dignity, mutual service, and this deep sacrificial love. Okay, so this is all great theology, right? But how do we actually do this? let's bring it down to earth and get super practical about what this ancient principle looks like for us today in our crazy busy lives. All right, first things first, let's be super clear. The point is not that you need to quit your job for a year, okay? The real goal here is to grab onto the timeless principle behind the law to intentionally and without apology make your marriage a top priority, especially in those early foundational seasons, but really always. So, what does that actually look like in real life? Well, maybe it looks like a weekly connection ritual. First, you protect your time. That means learning to say no to some things so you can say a big yes to each other. Next, you've got to be present. And I mean really present. Phones down, truly with each other, not just, sharing the same airspace. Then you invest in joy. What are the small things, the intentional little moments that just delight each other? And finally, you got to talk about the big stuff. Get on the same page about money, family, your dreams, all of it. And I really want you to remember this. Carving out this time, fiercely protecting your connection, that is not selfish. It's one of the smartest, wisest investments you could ever make. It builds this rock-solid foundation that doesn't just benefit you two, it makes you a stronger team for everything else life throws at you. It really honors this idea that our relationships are meant to be a source of incredible strength and joy. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. How might your life change if you started seeing the time you invest in your connection not as a luxury or an indulgence, but as something sacred? How would that totally reshape your priorities? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.